In this video, I'm going to show how attackers are compromising Microsoft 365 accounts, even if it has multi-factor authentication enforced. I'm also going to be focusing on how we can use a cool trick to potentially warn users whenever they go to a phishing website. As soon as they just put their username in and click on next, the background image will automatically change, warning the user not to enter their credentials. And this happens before the user, finishes authentication, and it's running in the cloud. Nothing needs to be installed on the user's computer. So let's dig in here. We'll start with first how authentication works with and without multi-factor authentication, and what is adversary-in-the-middle, which is how attackers are getting past multi-factor authentication. And I'll do a live demo showing how easy it is to sort of take over an account, even if it has multi-factor authentication. The focus of this presentation is on that trick I showed you earlier, which you can change a background image. And there's a lot to be said and discussed on how to prevent accounts from getting taken over through adversary-in-the-middle attacks, but this video is only focused on this adversary-in-the-middle detector. And that's where I'll go a deep dive with a demo, and we'll discuss how effective this detector can be, and close off with my recommendations on whether or not to set this up based off of what we discuss. Getting into authentication, I want to start out with an example which I'll build on as we go along with this presentation here. So think about if a user goes to an amusement park. Someone goes to an amusement park, he wants to go on rides, so he orders tickets online, and when he orders the tickets, they give him an order number. When he gets to the park, he gives the order number to the person, by the ticket booth, and the person then validates the order number is correct, and then gives him a ticket to get into the amusement park. Now, that ticket is number one, used to get into the park. Number two, for every ride that they go on, they have to show that ticket to every single person, every single ride. So it gets him in the park, and then he needs that ticket to go on all the rides. But once he has it, he's good to go from there. So let's compare this to multi-factor authentication when someone logs on to a website. We'll focus on Microsoft 365 in this case, and this is a high level, but this is essentially with any website essentially at a high level, like I said. So step one, put the username and password in, and then the website then validates the credentials and validates that it's correct. The website then gives a ticket, we'll call it a session token, and gets them into the resource. So number one, we'll let you into the resource. Number two, here's this ticket that gets loaded into your browser, call it a session token. And for any resource you want to access while logged into the website, you have that session that is that session token that's sort of living under the hood of your browser, and it is can be used whenever you want to go to different web pages, so that you don't have to log in again every single time. All right, so let's build off of that and go to another example here with amusement park. So example number two, these goes to amusement park, and they before they do so, they order their tickets online. They have an order number. They get to the park and give the person behind the ticket booth the order number, validates that the order number is correct, and then says, hey, when you order the tickets online, you put your name on the order number. Let's see some photo government ID validating that your name is on the order. Once you provide that, I'll give you that ticket again. So the user then gives their government ID, validates it, hey, your name matches the correct name, and then they get that same ticket again, gets them in the park, and allows them to go on all the rides. So let's compare this to multi-factor authentication with someone logging in with multi-factor authentication. So again, someone logs in, put their username, they put their password in, and validates the credentials. And in this case, before giving them access to the resource, they do an additional validation. Hey, we're going to send you a text message or a push notification, just doing additional validation that you are the owner of the account. Once that completes, again, they get access to the resource. Think of it like the ticket, and then they're also giving a session token. Think of it, that ticket getting to any resource. They can go to Outlook, they can go to OneDrive, SharePoint, stuff like that. So one of the things to think about is that, and you'll see where we go with this, no matter how a person authenticates, like with or without multi-factor authentication, once that process is complete, they have that session token, which allows them to stay logged in and go to different resources. So again, no matter how they log in, it's all the same. So if, again, we're going to focus on that session token. If someone gets access to that, that's where we start having a problem. Let's build off of this and go to another case where the user goes, same thing as before, orders the tickets online, gets to the place, and what they don't realize is that when they get to the ticket counter, there's someone in front of the ticket counter pretending to work for the park, and asks them for the order number. And they give them the order number, and the person then turns around, tells the person at the ticket counter, "Hey, here's my ticket number. Let me in." And then once they validate the ticket number, the person behind the counter gives the person in the middle the ticket. That person in the middle then takes a copy of the ticket and holds on to one for himself, and then gives it to the person. Let's say the original or copy to a person. Both of them go into the amusement park. They get in, and then both of them can get to all the rides, where neither of them necessarily know that the other one has a ticket. So with just that ticket, they can get on they can get in and get on all the rides. And you'll see where we're going with this and how problematic this can be with regards to a session token. So AiTM, Adversary-in-the-Middle, is this problem. In the old times, a couple of years ago, and attackers are still, rarely using this, when they set up a phishing website, they have to create the website themselves. They create a logon page, fake Microsoft logos, stuff like that. And when you go to the website, when you enter your credentials into the website, you're not actually logging into the real website. Your information is just getting stored on the website itself, and then on the phishing website, and then the attacker, it goes into a log file, gets sent in wherever it gets sent in. The attacker then has to later put the information you provided into the website and log into it. Well, if you have multi-factor authentication, they never had that multi-factor authentication, so they can never get in. In this case, this is where Adversary-in-the-Middle kicks in. Think about Adversary-in-the-Middle, where there's that person in the middle, literally, where an attacker sets up a server that is a phishing website, but itself doesn't really have any images. When you go to that site, it starts a real connection to the target website, let's say Microsoft 365, and whatever information the target website responds in a normal login, it provides back to the user. So what the user sees on the actual screen, what they're looking at, they see a real Microsoft logon because it is a real Microsoft logon. They just don't realize that it's going through, calling it proxied, through a phishing website. So what the domain they see on top, it's not Microsoft, it'll be a phishing website, but visually what they see on the screen is really Microsoft. So whether or not the user has or doesn't have multi-factor authentication, the phishing website in the middle proxies that information in real time to first asks for a username, it validates it, and then when Microsoft asks for MFA prompt, the thing in the middle is just sort of brokering that connection between you and Microsoft. They'll pass on that request, whether it be a push notification or through Microsoft Authenticator, it'll be SMS message. Microsoft sees the adversary in the middle as what they think is you, so they're just providing a regular logon session. So once that session completes, Microsoft then issues a session token, a session cookie here you see on the screen, and they get a copy of that, and they can, with just that information alone, they can then log into your account without having to need your username and password. Just that logon session alone gets them into the account. Let's compare this to an indirect proxy attack. This is a little bit more complicated, and I'll explain why it's relevant later on in this video. And an indirect proxy attack, it sort of uses the old way and the new way combined. So when you go to the phishing website, what you see on the screen is what the attacker, the adversary in the middle, created. So they'll actually create a fake landing page. However, when you go to their site, they're starting a real session with Microsoft, and it'll do the same thing with allow you going through multi-factor authentication. However, they have a lot more control of what you see on the screen, focused on, they can modify logos, they can modify whatever they want. They'll bring in, organizational logos that companies have. But again, big distinction, they control what you see a lot more than the direct proxy. Indirect is where they have that, granular level of control over what you see. So let's actually do a live demonstration on doing just this here. So the tool that we're going to use in this demonstration is called EvilGinx. EvilGinx is a direct proxy. It is open source and free. is created by a Kuba Gretzky, who is a red teamer, a really great guy who didn't invent anything new. It was always something that existed. He just created an open source version for it. He has a paid version of it as well, which he recently released. Recommend checking his content and his platform out on this. So let's actually get this set up here, and I'll explain to you what's happening under the hood. So what I have here is a virtual machine that you see it's going to a phishing website. Now this phishing website, phishingdemo.xyz, it goes to this server here that is running in the cloud. I'm going to spin up EvilGinx here, and when you go to the phishing website, it will hit this computer here and broker that connection with Microsoft 365. So let's go ahead and actually do this here. So I'm going to minimize this here real quick, and let's maximize this here real quick. So right now we are starting a real session. What you see on the screen again is Microsoft 365. However, look at the URL. It is not Microsoft 365. What we see here in EvilGinx, we see a new session created, and let's actually play this out. So I will go ahead and log in with a real Microsoft 365 account, and we will show you how easy it is to get through multi-factor authentication. So we'll go ahead and click next, and it's asking for the password. We'll put the password in, and this account does have multi-factor authentication, so I'll go ahead and approve of the prompt that pops up here, again simulating what happens if a user falls for a phishing attack. So I got a pop-up on my phone, I'm putting 55 in, and I just approve the multi-factor authentication prompt. So I'll go ahead and click yes and let that authentication complete, and you see it redirects again to a real Microsoft logon page. Now let's bounce back here at EvilGinx and see what happened under the hood. So we see here the username, we see a password, and let's look at session information about what we just did. So let's look at session 62, and what we see here is here's the username and here's the password, and this is the important bit. This here is a session token. With just this information alone, I can log into that account. So I don't need the first part, username and password and MFA. I can just log into that account, and let's just do just that. I'm going to go to another browser that I'm not logged in on. You see here it is office.com. If I would be logged on, it would show me login. I am then going to go and clear out the current cookies and then import that cookie that was just stolen. Nope, that is the wrong thing here. Let me bounce back and get it. So we'll get this here. And then paste it into here. We'll import it. And then all we got to do now is let us go to refresh the page. And we'll go to portal. Let's just say Outlook. Let's just say portal.office.com. And let's see what happens here. As we can see, no username, no password, no multi-factor authentication. We are logged into this account. With just that token alone importing it into the session, we are logged in. Just to show you here, let's go to, let's say, outlook.office.com, just to show you here as an example. We have that token. Think about that ticket. It's living in a browser. It means, hey, you already passed the gates of like the amusement park example. You're in and you have a ticket that's loaded into your browser, and you can get to any resource you want. And this is just showing you here how easy it is to get through multi-factor authentication and how common it is for attackers to do this. And I'll get into a bit on more information on what kind of platforms they use as well. All right, let's go back here to the presentation, and like I mentioned earlier, EvilGinx was released in 2017. This is not something that's new. What's relatively new is because most organizations are now having multi-factor authentication, percentage-wise, more and more attackers are utilizing adversary-in-the-middle attacks. EvilGinx is one example of this. However, Attackers have their own platforms that they use, phishing as a service platforms. Nearly all phishing nowadays has adversary-in-the-middle attacks. It's a new way phishing. It's a new way phishing is nearly always used in most environments with phishing attacks. So I want to show you here a GIF that I found on Microsoft where they're discussing multi-factor authentication and how to it's discussing recommendation of multi-factor authentication because of identity-based attacks. They claim that if you utilize multi-factor authentication, it can help prevent 99% of attacks. Well, I've got a quick update here. 5% of the time. With more and more attackers utilizing these adversary-in-the-middle attacks, I'd say only 5% of the time, even if you have multi-factor authentication, it'll actually stop an attack. Now, their 99 is really focusing on, comparing it to legacy authentication attacks. However, this is just sort of, playing on their numbers here. This 99% is no longer effective because legacy authentication is, for the most part, blocked. And with people having multi-factor authentication, it's still, very rarely blocks unless you have a lot of controls in place. So that's sort of the back end with an explanation on how attackers are compromising accounts with multi-factor authentication. Now I'll focus on sort of the main part of this video on that cool background changing and how all that happened. So this all started in January 9th, 2024. A company called Zolder, which is a really cool company that they have paid services for protecting Microsoft 365 accounts, very active blog, do a lot for the community in terms of what they post. They posted an article on how you can utilize a honey token to detect adversary-in-the-middle attacks. Before I jump into their article, taking a deep dive, it'll be useful if I first give a little background knowledge on how it works under the hood before I dig into their article. So Microsoft allows organizations to customize the background with the logon page when a user legitimately logs into Microsoft's website. So as you can see here, organizations can modify the background image, logo, text, stuff like that. And what's important that I highlighted here is that an organization, an administrator can upload a custom CSS file to be presented to the user that's provided to them when they log in, which can provide some additional things that I'll explain a bit what it can do. So CSS, it's a language that's used to style and layout HTML content on web pages, controlling elements, colors, fonts, spacing, positioning, responsive to different screen sizes. So what Microsoft allows an administrator to do is they can upload something like this onto the Microsoft 365 platform, and every time a user logs on, the user on their browser, they're given the CSS information, and then they, on their computer, load whatever the CSS is, and they allow an administrator to reference an external image, meaning you can host image on your platform, and that can get into the background, and I'll show a bit more in the next slide here. So think about if a user wants to log on, the first step is they put their username. So they enter the username and then they click on next. Microsoft then looks at the domain, links it to the correct tenant, and says, hey, this organization actually has additional custom branding, and here's this bit of code that you should run on your browser, and you should request it. Here's a background image of what it should look like, and then take the background image and combine it with the actual background, logon page, and then combine those two and have some company branded, logon page, again combining both a real logon page and this image here that I'm highlighting, turn it into one thing here to make it more customized for the organization. So let's actually take a quick look at just this on how it all works under the hood with getting back to what I showed you earlier on a live demo. Alright, so let's go back to the virtual machine. This is a real Microsoft logon page. So you see log on to microsoftonline.com, I'm going to put a real username in to a tenant that I have this running in. And before I click on next, I'm going to hit F12 just to show you on the network side, after I do this, how it all works under the hood, putting it all together. So I'm going to click on next, and as you can see, this AiTM awareness on the bottom left is what suddenly just popped up as the company branding for this site. Now let's actually take a look at this. So what we see here on the bottom is the network information of what's happening under the hood. And let's look at when I was logging in and I clicked on next, Microsoft provided this. This is the custom CSS that I have set up for this environment. So as we can see here, the external sign-in box, that's this white box here on top. And here is the link that this custom logo in the bottom left, it's hosted here. This is running, I'll explain a bit in an Azure function, and it is listening for a request and then provided it here. So here's where it gave the user's browser, hey, take this and load it. So here's where we can see a couple things later on. It requested just that. So it hit this site that I was provided, and this was as you can see on the bottom right, the actual image that was provided. It then combined it with the Microsoft logon page to show you the company branded page. So this is really all, putting it all together in one here. So that's one thing. The next thing here I want to show you is another information that we need to move forward back to the Zolder article. So another thing that I just wanted to bring out here is when you go to a website and then it has a link to another website, the second website gets information on who sent you to the second website. So I'm going to show you here, this is an Azure function that's running where this is web page 1, and I'm going to click here and it's going to take me to a second website, and that second website is going to show me what information the user in the website provides the website. So it's not going to actually load anything else other than just that. So again, this is website 1, and then I'm going to click here. It's going to show me what information it has based off of what I just provided it. So this is a public IP address of where I am, and here is the browser that I'm using. It gives information about the operating system, and one of the things I want to focus on is this refer. So this refer website, this is actually this first domain, so the redirector, and this is saying that, hey, this website is the one that referred me to this web page here. This is where it gets, I'll build off of this a bit later on how important this refer information is. So getting back to the Zolder article, let's actually take a look at the article and read more about it now that we have that background information in play. All right, let's bring it up here and let us take a look at this article here. So again, this is back in January 2024. What they figured out was this company branding and with the refer information. What if, well, thinking about how you understand the attacker in the middle. When a user is logging on to a phishing website, again, they see the phishing website. The phishing website then interacts with Microsoft. Microsoft then provides the CSS file, and then the domain that provides the CSS file to you is not Microsoft directly. It's the thing in the middle, EvilGinx, whatever Adversary-in-the-Middle platform is being used. So with just that information, what if we just point it to a site that's listening specifically for the refer, and when it's coming from Microsoft 365, don't do anything. However, when the refer is anyone other than Microsoft 365, indicating that it is a phishing attack, go ahead and trip an alert. So if this platform that you have that's running, it can know who referred you. So it can say, hey, I know that this website, this phishing website, here's the actual website that's being used because it's showing in this refer, and also here's the public IP address of the person that's being phished. So you can then, as a security team, you can get that alert here, and track that down and do some quick containment to stop the person from getting compromised. This is the first step here. No, not getting into the changing the background. This was the first step where on the alerting side. So they provided really cool the fact that they created they provided this for free. They allowed people to set that up in a Microsoft 365 tenant. They show you step-by-step guide on how to configure company branding and where to upload the custom CSS file. You can generate a unique link for your company, and then they show you how to create a custom CSS file, put your unique link in, and then upload the CSS to Microsoft 365, and then you can get alerted anytime someone's getting phished. So that's really, really cool. Again, big thanks to Zolder for putting this out there really quickly. Really, really cool. So let us move forward here. So that was that article from Zolder again. This was on the 9th of January. And this was the site that they had to allow people to use it for free. And again, this is still live. So take advantage of Zolder. They do some great work for the community. Really, really good blogs they put out. So it's definitely a company you should follow and check out their products. On January 13th, Matt Kiely published a repo on GitHub where you can self-host this platform yourself, where you can determine what you want to do with the alerts. You can actually create a custom actions on your end, and let's take a quick look at it here. So for starters, again, he acknowledges it's experimental. Quickly acknowledges this, the Zolder for putting that out real quick. And again, this is publicly available where you can take a look at this and review the code yourself and customize it. But let's take a quick look at the actual file, where the first thing I want to focus on is a refer. So it looks at who referred you, puts it into a variable, and asks a simple question. Does Microsoft's site, log on to microsoftonline.com, does it exist in the refer? If it does, you're good to go. If not, here's where it's causing a print statement on the server, and at that point, you can add a webhook to alert you and whatever customization, whatever custom solutions you want to do. This is just really cool on getting a really cool proof of concept published really quickly. Really big thanks to him for putting that out there. So that was on the 19th. Getting into next step here, that was on the 14th. On the 19th, this is what really blew my mind on the next step that this turned into, is a person, Kevin Tegelaar, who is the creator of CIPP. CIPP is a really cool and awesome platform where you can manage your Microsoft 365 environment, and you can self-host it for free in Azure. You can also pay a relatively low fee to have it hosted on their end, and they do automatic updates. It's a really cool product for MSPs because it's primarily built for multi-tenancy, where it uses GDAP to manage different environments. It does it much better than Microsoft does. Much cooler reports. A lot of you can enforce standards for all of your clients potentially, depending on how you configure it. So definitely check that out. Either way, he also very frequently updates his product and has a lot of community support. He put a LinkedIn post out on the 19th with an update to CIPP, and I want to take a look at the link because it was so cool when it came out. It still is cool. So he looked at the Zolder article and also worked with the creator of Clarion and said, hey, I have this idea. What if when a user is logging onto a phishing website, instead of just creating an alert, what if we also provide them a different image? So when you're requesting an image, so we see who referred you, and then you're still asking for an image. If it's a bad site, a phishing site, let's just give you a bad image. So let's take a look here real quick. As soon as it detects a phishing attack, the background image changes. This is all pre-authentication before the user completes the login. So you could potentially stop a user from being phished in real time. Super cool. To where the background changes, and hopefully they'll you see he puts some text, do not enter your password. So this can really stop user from inputting their credentials into a phishing website. So I want to show you here real quick. I plan on putting this out online, a public version as well. where I have this running in an Azure function, very basic version of this where using the Azure Flex plan where you can deploy it and then use the endpoint from the Azure function in your custom CSS, where it looks at the refers. Again, it has a couple more in this case that I noticed, that more than just log on to microsoftonline.com, and this one will provide a safe image path. So there's two things, a safe one or a bad one. I'll get to that in a bit. I'm not going to jump ahead of myself here, but essentially it looks at the refer doesn't exist, or if it's not a valid refer, essentially reply with that bad image. So let's actually circle back on to EvilGinx and show you how the background images have background images changes where we could potentially warn a user. So let me go ahead and get that set up here. All right, let's go here again. We're going to go back to the phishing site. Again, this is not Microsoft. This is a phishing demo.xyz, and we'll go ahead and input a my logon that I had before and showing you with this tool turned on. As we can see, after about a second or so, it pops up, hey, this is a phishing attack. Do not enter your password. You can create whatever custom logo you want or images. One thing to note is that sometimes, depending on the logon page, it'll be different lengths. So I put things on the side. You'll notice messing around sometimes it can have one image on top of another depending on the logon page. But as you can see here, it pops up, and let's actually look at this under the hood. See if we can look at that same F12 again at the network, and as we can see here, it may not load because it was already loaded. I'll go ahead and reload the page and show you the custom CSS loading. Go ahead and put that in here and the demo user account, and we'll go ahead and click on next and follow this through with an explanation as we showed you earlier. Cool. So as we can see here, here's again as we're logging on the custom CSS, and then it tells us, hey, go to this website for the image. And then when I go to that image here, one of the most important parts about this is this refer. As you can see here, the refer is not Microsoft. The refer is phishing demo.xyz, which is why we get a different response. Hey, let's modify the background and change it to this. So this is an explanation of putting this all together on how, again, combining the different the research from Zolder, from Clarion, and from Kevin Tegelaar from CIPP to have this all work together to warn a user. Another thing to note is that while it was baked into CIPP, Zolder also bolted into their product as well pretty quickly as well. And again, most of this, all this research was really thanks to Zolder figuring this out and publishing it. So again, big thank you to them for putting that out there. Another thing to know is that one of the things I figured out in testing, so I had this set up and was testing for a while, is that it doesn't only support images here. So I'll show you here something that I set up just for testing. Again, it's not live, but something pretty cool here. All right, let's hop back over to the sandbox here and go to the same link again, and let's see what happens. So again, we're on the phishing one. We're not on the real Microsoft logon page. And what I realized was that, like I said, it doesn't just support flat images. You can actually have GIFs. So imagine seeing this when you log on to your log on. So I didn't actually have this running live in production. I just thought it was funny that you can give a GIF to a user, so you can get creative here. But this is just something cool I figured out when I was messing around with it. But I would prefer to do like a warning page, with more information than just Batman staring at you. All right, so on to the next topic. Microsoft, they always had the capabilities to do this, and they have they have their own research, but they never built in the the modification of background images. An interesting thing to note here, I bring this up, is where they recently added another domain when you're logging on legitimately, where you send a request with a refer. So they're not doing a background modification, but they are getting at least the data on who's referring them. And I'll get to a bit on how effective this is and if you can bypass it. This is a relatively recent one published on April in 2025. So the big question, does this stop all adversary-in-the-middle attacks, and can this phish detector be used to warn users in all scenarios to have them not put their credentials in? Unfortunately, the answer is no. There are ways that attacker can bypass it and abuse it. So let's go ahead and dig into that. I always knew it was possible. However, someone put a pretty good article out going into all the different ways you can actually, an attacker can get past this phish detector. I'm not going to go through the whole article. I'll put a link to it. Just at a high level, circle through some of these, where number one, they can choose not to send the CSS information to the user. So when the user's logging on, they don't get the CSS. Also, they can set the refer to not give a refer. There are ways to do that, and it's a pretty detailed article here. One of the things I want to highlight, just because I saw it, was another thing you can do is anyone can view the custom CSS for organization. All you have to do is go to a logon page and put a valid username, and you can see the CSS. Now, you can see the endpoint that's hosting the image, and an attacker can very easily perform attacks where they can send a bunch of fake information. So the refer is something the client, the user who's going to the website, he tells the browser, hey, here's my information. But technically, you can spoof it and modify it and say you're coming from a different website. Now, in this case, an attacker can hit the endpoint that's hosting the image and say, hey, this site referred me. No, that site referred me, and give a lot of legitimate platforms to where if you have some alerting baked in to your or automation that's doing stuff, maybe blocking things, this will really wreak havoc on any of those automations or alerting, because they can just overwhelm you with a lot of just junk data, and you won't really know who referred them. You'll see the public IP address, so you can play with that to filter it out. They can proxy it through different ones. However, this is something I have seen attackers do. It's not very frequently, but I have seen on several occasions where they'll put random domains as a refer, Bing.com, Google, stuff like that. I've even seen them bounce the actual domain that I was using to host the refer, the custom image. They put that as a refer back to me, to where it can be something that could have potentially caused issues with it, blocking it everywhere if you have some automations kicked in. Now, we had some automations before that. We modified that to in that scenario to not auto block things, and we had a whitelist. So in that case, it didn't really do any harm with it, blocking, let's say, Bing.com and stuff like that they passed on. However, it's just something to know about, that you have to take the refer with a grain of salt. So this is one reason why it doesn't stop all adversary-in-the-middle attacks. Another thing is is it worth setting this up? Yes, but you have to understand its limitations. First limitation is it can be bypassed or abused. Second one, which is much more important than the first one, is that it doesn't work with indirect proxy attacks. So with indirect proxy, when you go to a phishing site, you're not actually going directly to Microsoft, and the attacker isn't showing you what Microsoft actually provides. They're creating whatever phishing platform front end, whatever phishing content they want you to see, and they do not provide the CSS information to you. So you'll never get the CSS file to know where to go to get the image. So you'll never get that warning. And unfortunately, most of the phishing platforms that I see, big ones are phishing as a service ones, they all utilize indirect proxies. So for the most part, this phish detector is very ineffective based off of what I'm seeing. Now, I've heard other companies have better luck with it. It could just be with the clients that we have, that we manage. But It's just something to know about, understand its limitations. So, wrapping up here, getting into some final thoughts. Adversary-in-the-Middle, bypassing MFA, this is the new phishing. Nearly all phishing attacks that are targeting organizations have this adversary-in-the-middle capabilities that can get through multi-factor authentication. Do some research. There's a lot of research that you can do, a lot of information to prevent it from happening. High-level phish-resistant MFA is the key. It's hard at the time to set up just because it's not so mature. There are some other controls, device compliance, stuff like that to know about. Again, that's a whole other conversation. Just number one, understand that it's possible. And I do think it is worth with setting up this adversary-in-the-middle detector. It doesn't harm anyone by setting it up. You can use it as a signal. Again, think about what you want to do with information if you have alerting baked into it. But this is something that I do recommend that you set up and just have. Again, just if it stops one attack, it's worth setting this up. We did stop several attacks initially, early 2024 with this. It was a really good feeling with, having a user, totally not understand why they're, get that background pop up, and then getting a quick phone call from our security team. So it is worth doing it, even if it's not, like I said, even if it stops one attack. I do recommend getting this set up to, to have this as, defense in depth. One of the things that's helping you stop attacks. So that is all here for today. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I'm going to put on GitHub a light version of this adversary-in-the-middle detector with just the bad image that I had earlier. I post on LinkedIn once in a while. I focus a lot on phishing, adversary-in-the-middle, something I'm very passionate about. And recently I started a YouTube channel, which is where I'm posting this on. So definitely, check back and follow for additional videos. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.